Hello and welcome back to the Footy Frontline podcast brought to you by My Betting Mate. My name is D'urbano and I'm joined here today by Oliver Caffrey to run through all the big talking points from the weekend of footy. Ollie, another big weekend, plenty happening, but after this week, now we head back into normal service, resuming 9 games a weekend, but the buys are finally over after this week.
Oh, thank God for that. Yeah, 6 games a weekend, not a fan. I reckon they should just have... Chris Scott made a good point during the week. He said, yeah, just have a mid-year shutdown period. They did have that for, I reckon, a couple of years in the mid-2000s maybe. I can't remember exactly when it was, but yeah, they did have that. But if you did have that, then you'd have people complaining, there's no footy on. So you're going to have unhappy people either way. But yeah, it'd be good just to see 9 games back this weekend because it's a very tight competition.
Well, there's still plenty happening over the weekend. And one of the big talking points is we're still recording here on Monday we're about 48 hours on from this, but Port Adelaide absolutely obliterated at home against your mob Brisbane at Adelaide Oval. It was a 79-point loss that I think it wasn't surprising that Brisbane actually won this game, but by this amount. I mean, they were absolutely smashed, and now they're just hanging on to a spot in the 8. I mean, what did you make of that match on Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, really unsavoury scenes at the Adelaide Oval, and it just got super ugly. And you just looked at the crowd at the end of that match, like probably more than 50% of the crowd had already left. I think a few of the news crews got very unhappy people walking out of the ground, doing a few vox pops, and yeah, just they've had Ken in their sights for a long time. It's a very interesting club. I can't really think of another club who would seriously turn on their coach the way Port Adelaide has with Ken Hinkley. You saw the way West Coast supporters really got behind Adam Simpson when it looked like he was completely done. I know he has a premiership, so that probably does make a bit of a difference. Maybe it would be a different scenario if he didn't have that flag in his bag that Ken doesn't. But yeah, you hate to see that. And Chris Fagan was really supportive of him in the post-game, said it was probably the only disappointing thing about the afternoon was knowing that Ken Hinkley got booed off the ground. So... yeah, he hasn't made a grand final in 12 seasons he's been at the helm, so it is a long time, but I think he deserves more respect than that. He's a good guy. He's been a good coach for them. You go back to where they were when he took over. They were a complete basket case. They were a shambles. They were getting no one to games. They were at Adelaide, the old Amy Stadium out at West Lakes, and they just couldn't get a crowd out there. And
the Tarps used to be
the
up.
Tarps, yeah, they still have that nickname to this day among a few supporters. But yeah, they had a really poor, probably 4 or 5 seasons after. It took them a long time to get over that 2007 grand final loss. Really tore the heart out of the club. And Ken Hinkley comes in, first season, play finals, and then the year after they fall within a kick of making a grand final. But yeah, I guess the frustration's there because it has been, the promise was there so early on. 2 seasons straight away, you're playing finals after a really abysmal time, but then it's gone a long time. So it's hard to see him surviving this. And if it got to 100 points where it really looked like it might go at one point, it had all the makings of a 100-point obliteration. And if it got to that point and you thought, maybe they make a move on him. But it's hard, like, unless their performances become just the norm in the second half of the season, they completely fall away and miss finals, then, yeah, he might go earlier. But, yeah, the pressure is red hot at the moment, and, yeah, they just capitulated. They were okay in the first quarter and a bit. They got within 6 points early in the second quarter, but, yeah, the Lions were just fierce. They were up for the contest. That was probably the best they played on the road. I can't remember. Probably since 2019, that was probably the best home and away win I reckon they've had since 2019 when they were really making that charge up the ladder after a really long time down the lower end of the ladder. So the Lions played it super well, but yeah, all the attention's been on Port Adelaide because just you shouldn't be losing by 79 points at home when you're a finals contender at all. Like, you probably shouldn't be losing by 79 points at home ever, let alone when you're a finals contender. So there's still a chance to make finals. They're 8-6.
Yeah.
You forget about that. There's still a chance, but yeah, it is turning really ugly. And yeah, Ken Hinkley said after the game, his messaging has changed. You go to the start of the season, he said, we're good enough. We can win the premiership. We've really brought in a lot of depth throughout the off-season, and we've filled those holes. But, yeah, those holes were badly exposed on the weekend. All the players they brought in, they looked totally out of sorts. The two defenders, Zerk Thatcher, was subbed out tactically at halftime. That is really, really bad sign for him. And then, Sava Adeglia just had a nightmare down there. There was a lot of ball coming in. Better defenders than him would struggle with that amount of ball coming in that quickly. But, he made some really bad mistakes. And, Jordan Sweet in the ruck came from the Bulldogs at the end of last season, was brought in, replaced Ivan Soldo, who was dropped, and just got towed up by Oscar McInerney. Was just nowhere near it. So, it'd be really deflating to be a Port Adelaide supporter right now. But, you don't like to see that at all, the booing and the jeering.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, it's an interesting one now for Port Adelaide. They've lost their last 3 games, an average deficit of 46 points in each of those 3 games as well, a couple of those being at home as well. Big loss against Carlton as well before the bye. It's an interesting end to the year for them. 4 of their last 9 only at home. A lot of tough trips coming up. 3 games in Melbourne. They have to go to Gold Coast where the Suns haven't lost at home. They've got to go back to Perth. Their next few games, St Kilda at Marvel Stadium this week, which shapes a must-win game against a team that have struggled this season. The Bulldogs at Adelaide Oval, Gold Coast, and then Richmond. So these 4 games against teams that are all outside the top 8, if they're going to, I mean, they have had this reputation as of late of being a bit of a flat track bully and beating those sort of lower teams, but not beating the teams that they should beat. They have to win them because you can only beat who's really in front of you, right? Like they really need to get these results. They need to try and turn things around. The 8 is so tight at the moment that 4 wins could completely change the mood. It could get some momentum for them. They could still even theoretically
12 and 6.
Yeah, exactly. It puts them in the hunt for top 4. So
even 3 of those wins. Like, they'll probably go in as underdogs against Gold Coast away, but the other games, like, they really should win those.
Yeah, well, you'd think that they beat St Kilda and Richmond. That Bulldogs game shapes as the one that's the 50-50. Yeah. But at home, you'd still back them in. Of course, every week there's going to be more pressure on Ken Hinkley. This is now his 12th season, and, he's got another year contracted next year. And as you said, he's done some really good things with Port Adelaide. I mean, he's probably been one of their most successful coaches, not named Mark Williams, and he's got them
second most successful coach.
Yeah, I mean, four prelims. Obviously they've fallen short, in some of those. They've got 3 or 4 prelims, I think.
3 prelims.
3 prelims, sorry. They came very close in the 2 COVID years where they probably should have at least made 1 grand final with 2 home prelims.
2020 was probably both really in hindsight, but they were smashing that 2021 against the Bulldogs. But the Richmond one's really going to haunt them because they were in front and it went down to the wire. So, at least one of those should have been a grand final appearance because they were home prelim finals as well.
So, and I mean, there's been a lot of talk about how long does a coach survive without winning a premiership. It always comes to this point where that chatter begins and you look at, when people start comparing it to what was happening with Nathan Buckley, you look at what happened with Brad Scott at North Melbourne, and it feels like a similar storyline starting to play out here. So I think with each passing loss, each passing week, that pressure's going to rise. It's new leadership now at Port Adelaide as well. The looming Josh Carr succession plan has seemed to just sort of hover in the background. So I'm very fascinated to see how things play out there, but they've got to bounce back this weekend against St Kilda. Let's move on and talk about a team who are just at the complete 180 of Port Adelaide at the moment, and that is Carlton. They're sitting in second. They really stamped their credentials as a flag fancy on Friday night. They absolutely dismantled Geelong at the MCG, a resounding victory. It was a statement. They were brilliant in the middle. They were brilliant up forward. They made Geelong look like a team that were outside the top 8. They just could not keep up with how well the Blues played in all facets of the ground. They're starting to really come into their own now. They had a bit of a lean patch, but now they're really starting to put their foot down as we enter the last bit of the season. Yeah,
their midfield's scary. Cripps, Walsh, De Koning, they're just up and about. Still have Chera to come back in as well. And, Cripps and Walsh, they're at the moment, they're the best one to punch as a midfielder combo in the competition. They're just outstanding. Just get plenty of the footy and they hurt you too. Cripps is at the peak of his powers, arguably. I think he's probably having a better season than his Brownlow year a couple of years ago. So he's just in outstanding form and, like you said, just completely destroyed the Cats who they lost against 8 weeks earlier. So an amazing turnaround and never looked like losing that game. De Koning came up against his brother in the ruck. That was a great contest. Yep. And, he got the first goal of the game and that really set the tone for the performance. And, the Carlton supporters are getting really excited now, and so they should be. This time last year, they were just starting to get on that run that took them to the prelim final, but had a good first half of this season, and they've continued it on, it seems, already. So all the pieces are there as they should be. Like, they were down the bottom ladder for so long, loaded up on draft picks, and yeah, that's the core of their team at the moment. That 2015 draft, absolutely brilliant, bringing in those key position players. But yeah, they look really good as the second team. Sydney's obviously the benchmark right now, but I think Carlton have really pushed themselves into that clearly second best team right now. Could change by finals, but right now they're playing the second best footy behind the Swans. So yeah, really exciting for Blue supporters.
I mean, Jordan Lewis summed it up on Fox Footy after the game. He said that he feels Sydney and Carlton are daylight better than everyone else. I think that's a bit of an overstatement, because I don't think there is daylight between Carlton and the rest. No. I mean, you know, Collingwood is still getting their troops back. I think that Brisbane's got another push in them. I think even the Giants, despite a disappointing performance against Sydney, they can still all stack up against the likes of Carlton. I think that, you know, it's your typical, you know, in the moment, you know, you see a big performance like that, and you might get a bit caught up in the excitement. And then you should. I mean, Carlton are playing some beautiful football at the moment. They're really starting to come into their own at this stage of the season. They only play 3 top 8 teams in the run home. And, you know, they do play Hawthorn, who are one of those sides sort of on the periphery and in some great form as well. But they've got a great run in, which they will back themselves to lock in a top 4 spot. I mean, I don't think they've actually made the top 4 in many, many years. It'll be over 20 years now, because it may be 2001.
I think it'd be 2000.
Yeah.
Not even 2001. It'd be 2000, so that's 24 years.
24 years. It's an incredible wait for that long, you know. And obviously they've made a prelim, you know, last year when they came from outside the top 4. But it seems like this year they're not only in a good spot to lock up a top 4 spot, but be really in control of their destiny, to not have to leave Melbourne at all, you know, winning a home qualifying final, playing a home prelim, and then it's all about basically for all these teams avoiding having to go to the SCG. And Carlton, I think, would back themselves, you know, in doing that. So it's going to be an interesting run home. You did mention they get Adam Chera back. They also get Matt Cottrell back. There are other players sort of in the mix, like David Cunningham and Jack Martin and Mark Pitnet, try to find that best mix in the ruck and midfield. It'll be very interesting to see what Michael Voss does in the weeks ahead, but a big, big result for the Blues last Friday. Let's have a look ahead to this week, because it all starts on Friday night at the Gabba. Brisbane against Melbourne. Brisbane, we spoke about, big winners against Port Adelaide. Melbourne, they won, but it was not convincing.
Didn't score in the last quarter.
Oh, they
still won.
Yeah, hung on for dear life against the bottom place Kangaroos. They got the job done. It seemed like it was over, but as you mentioned, Ollie, they didn't score it in the last quarter, and it got quite tight at the end there. Brisbane going as overwhelming favourites, and rightfully so for this game.
Yeah, they do. Melbourne's form has really dropped off. They won that game, and the relief on all the players and coaches' faces after that was just overwhelming, because they got out of jail. It took a debutant as the sub to come on and arguably save the game for them. A brilliant tackle from young Brown, the father-son pick, and what a moment that was. That would be replayed in the Demons rooms for a long time, and yeah, that could just be the lift they need, because they have been so flat. A lot of things have gone against them. Petrarca is out for the season, as we know, and yeah, they looked in that last quarter. Their midfield was just absolutely smashed, obliterated by North Melbourne. The North Melbourne midfield is coming along pretty nicely, but you'd hope as a Melbourne fan that your midfield would be able to stack up against the bottom side, and it didn't, and it nearly won them the game. They were streaming out of the middle of the Kangaroos midfielders, but yeah, Melbourne go to the Gabba. They lost against the Lions early in the season at the MCG when they were going a lot better than they are now. They had Petrarca then. So, yeah, it's hard to make a case for them, although there's been some great battles over the years between the Lions and the Demons. So that might give them a bit of confidence heading up there. First time at the Gabba since the famous lights out game in round 2 last season. Yep. So the Lions just hung on in that one. But, yeah, the Lions have really hit form. Like, the last 3 weeks have been probably some of the best they've played under Chris Fagan. Just an amazing turnaround considering where they were. Their forward line has just transformed to what it was, and arguably better than what it was, which is just amazing, because they looked shot. Their forward line wasn't functioning at all, and it can go to another level too, because Charlie Cameron is still just a little way off. There's something, everyone else is firing.
Yeah.
Hipwood is probably having his best 3 games of his career, in a row. and Joe Danhurst kicking goals from everywhere, and they're all getting in the knack. Midfielders kicking goals now, so yeah, their profile looks pretty good. So, but when you do come back from a long way, it can take a toll. We saw that with the Giants and Blues at the end of the last season. Once they got to the finals, like probably they were still playing some great footy, but does that take a toll on you? So we'll see what happens to the Lions, but they should get the job done at the Gabba. I think about 5 goals, and yeah, their midfield is really firing as well as their forward line. So yeah, Clayton Oliver still struggling. Maybe the interrupted pre-season, that's had an impact on him now. He started off the season okay, like a lot better than we expected, considering how affected his pre-season was. He missed a lot of training, but yeah, could it be taking a toll now? So with Petrarca out and then Oliver out of form, it makes it hard. Jack Viney really had to step up against North Melbourne. Max Gawn, just a beast. So yeah, that ruck contest is going to be really great to see. Gawn against McInerney, who's in great form. So I think the Lions, but I think the Demons will give it a decent account of themselves up there.
Yeah, I think Brisbane win this one as well. I mean, my tip is Eric Hipwood for multiple goals. He's been in some brilliant form. Maybe a return of Will Ashcroft this week as well, potentially, which is a huge in for Brisbane. It just seems like they're going from strength to strength with all these injuries they've had, but not just injuries, long-term injuries. Finally, some good news with some players coming back. I just can't see Melbourne winning this game. You know, going up to the Gabba, it feels like Brisbane's starting to find their feet. The good thing is you spoke about sort of not getting sort of burnt out by the end of the season. There's still so much time left in this year that they can sort of hit their straps and win a couple games, and suddenly they're knocking on the door of the top 4, and they can start to, you know, really lock in their spot, not feel like they're sort of chasing their own tails again. So I think they win this game, and I think they win it quite convincingly, and there's going to be a lot of questions once again for the D's heading into next week. Saturday afternoon at Marvel Stadium, North Melbourne against the Western Bulldogs. Now, the Kangas, I mean, they've been so unlucky the last couple of weeks. They didn't at least get one win, but they've been much improved. They take on the Bulldogs, who are coming off the bye. This is a big one because the Kangas, I think, will fancy themselves to push the Bulldogs all the way, but the Bulldogs did get a nice win before their week off against Fremantle. How do you see this one playing out at Marvel?
Yeah, I think the Bulldogs, fresh off a bye, they should win pretty convincingly, even though, the Melbourne, the last 3 weeks have been super impressive and thrilling games too. The last quarter was brilliant. Obviously, the first 3 quarters in that game against Melbourne weren't that attractive, but then you go back to the week before against Collingwood, that was just a shootout and ended up being a thrill, and they beat West Coast before that. So, yeah, they're turning out to be must-watch footy at the moment, but I can't see them getting close to the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs have smashed them in previous years. They've really bullied up on them. So I think, Melbourne's midfield, the way they're going, decimated midfield, out of form. It's a different story coming up against the Bulldogs midfield. Bontempelli, Liberatore, Ed Richards.
Yeah.
They are super strong in there. So I think the Bulldogs will win by about 7 goals. Although North Melbourne, there's a lot of bright sparks at the moment, which they just weren't there a month ago. So the fans are up and about. I reckon there were more North Melbourne fans there, even though it wasn't their home game on Saturday night, than there were Melbourne fans. And they were very loud. So, some optimism after some very, very bleak times.
Yeah, only 28,000 on Saturday night at the MCG.
It was cold, but Melbourne fans just don't tend to...
Well, it's snow season as well.
It is. They're
you know.
definitely up in Mount Buller.
So, look, for this weekend, I actually am a little bit more optimistic about the Kangas. I don't think they're going to win, but I think they'll give the Bulldogs a bit of a run. It all depends, because the bye is that fascinating thing where it can actually help a team. Sometimes they're freshened up afterwards, or they can be the complete opposite. And they can be, that run of momentum, it cuts off and then they have to sort of regather themselves. North Melbourne have all the momentum. Despite the losses, they have been so good. I think they push the Bulldogs close, but I just think that the Bulldogs will have too much class to win this game. Cam Zurhaar, though, has been in some great form. He'll kick multiple goals again. And that price tag, if he's in the off-season, I think with, the looming sort of contract situation, being out of contract, garnering a lot of interest, I'm going to put a few more extra, a bit more on that price tag if he continues this form. And North Melbourne are really going to have a battle to keep him next season. The other game on Saturday afternoon at the SCG, Sydney against the Dockers. Both teams recording wins on the weekend. Sydney, they were too good for GWS. They put the game away early. They had to withstand a little bit of a late fight, while Freo, they did what they had to do against Gold Coast. They got back on the winners list. They're into 5th. But there's arguably no harder test in footy right now than going to the SCG and trying to get 4 points. Do you give the Dockers any hope at the SCG?
I give them some hope because they did have a win there last season at the SCG. Obviously, the Swans are going much better than they were at that point in time. But, yeah, they were okay against Sydney early in the season at home. Just terrible goal kicking that night. It was just unbelievable to watch it. And it was the day after Cam McCarthy sadly passed away as well. So that was obviously on all their minds. But, yeah, they will take a bit out of that game knowing, I think it was like 2-14 at one stage to 4. Like, Sydney was shooting the lights out and the Dockers just couldn't score a goal at all. And it didn't end up being like a absolute humiliating night. But, yeah, Sydney are just firing. You thought, okay, the Giants, they tend to get up for these derbies and they really need a win. But, yeah, Sydney just held them at arm's length the whole game. They got us out 58 points at one stage and we're doing it easy.
Yeah.
Like, they were just cruising. And Giants got back in the game, gave them a tiny bit of a scare. They got to run on. But, yeah, that midfield, we spoke about Carlton's midfield before, but, yeah, Sydney obviously at the top of the tree at the moment. They just have so many weapons. They're great ball users. The Dockers midfield's pretty good as well, but I don't think there'll be any match for Sydney at SCG, and the Swans will keep that amazing winning run going. Their best start to a season in more than 100 years. It's quite
Scary.
Extraordinary what they're doing.
Yeah, it's very scary, and I think they win this game quite convincingly. I mean, if Alex Pearce is also missing this week, he was subbed out against Gold Coast.
Absolutely. It's a huge loss.
Huge out in defence. Probably been arguably one of the Australian contenders for fullback. Might even be the All-Australian fullback this year. He's so key for the way the Dockers play. I think Sydney are going to be too good. Errol Goulden's been in brilliant form. Over 40 disposals again last week. 25 plus, I think, this week is a good tip. And Sydney just continue that great form that they're in to really go this entire year. 4:35 up in People First Stadium. The Suns against the Pies. Gold Coast still yet to lose as the home team this year, whether it's been in Gold Coast or Darwin. They take on the Pies, who are fresh off the bye. They're going to be bolstered by some key-ins this week. Finally, some light at the end of the tunnel for Collingwood's injury crisis. But it's going to be an interesting one. The reigning premiers have been very good on the road, but Gold Coast have been extremely good at home this year. Do you think the Suns bounce back after a couple defeats on the road?
Yeah, sneaky game of the round contender this one, I think. Gold Coast were absolutely embarrassed up there last year against Collingwood. That was the end for Stuart Dew. They was smashed by 78 points, just completely blown off the park. In a game they went into thinking, okay, we can give this a good shot, and Collingwood just embarrassed them in front of their home supporters. So I think Gold Coast can bounce back just because their form has just been, it's just amazing. Go through all the stats, home and away. Home, I think their percentage is about 150. Away, it's hovering around 70. Obviously haven't won at all away from home. So if they're going to play finals this year, if they're going to break that drought, first time in 14 years in the competition, this is a game they need to win. Just have to do it. Take a scalp. I think they can do it, but you never write off Collingwood. They got out of jail against North Melbourne before the bye. I don't know how they did it. It's still extraordinary to come back from 54 points down. So they were playing some great footy before then, but it was very unconvincing against North Melbourne. Will the bye work in their favour? Probably, just because they had a pretty extensive injury list. They might get a few back, but I think Gold Coast form at home might get them over the line.
I disagree. I think the Pies win this one. No surprise there. I think Scott Pendlebury, Jordan De Goey, Brody Myercheck all coming back this week, or at least in the frame to come back, just gives them so much more if they're all playing in the midfield, a bit more structure up forward as well. All brilliant players in their own right. I think that Collingwood are just going to be too strong. I think it's going to go again right to the wires. It always does with Collingwood. It's always a close one. But these two teams always seem like throughout their history, they've always played some really interesting games up in Gold Coast. I mean, Gold Coast winning that game back in 2013, it was a famous win for them. There's a lot of history with that infamous Gary Ablett injury, in 2014, which probably ruled him out of a third Brownlow medal. You look back at one of the games they played. You mentioned last year where Collingwood really embarrassed them. A couple of years ago, they went real close.
2 years ago.
Yeah, so
cracker.
they always seem to have these interesting games up there, and you can expect a really good crowd because the Pies fans love to travel up to the Gold Coast. There's
School holidays.
There's even talk about them playing a home game there next year.
That's
it's just incredible. But I think the Pies just get up in this one, and Bobby Hill is in some great form at the moment, and I think he kicks multiple goals in this game as well. Saturday night at Adelaide Oval, Adelaide against the Giants. Adelaide fresh off the bye. It's just going from bad to worse for them this year. They were in such a good position to beat Sydney before the bye. They didn't get the job done, but this is probably the best time to play GWS, who are, fresh off, a pretty disappointing performance against Sydney. They'll be chomping at the bit to get back to winning ways. To give the Crows a chance to turn things around against GWS this week.
A small chance, but I think the Giants respond after the Derby loss. They showed some signs that they were starting to turn it around, but the Crows just been so disappointing. Both teams in South Australia at the moment totally under the pump. And if they put another bad performance in, like they are really embarrassed again, then the heat is going to go right up on Matthew Nicks as well. He's had the bye. The heat's been taken off with Ken Hinkley taking that mantle. But, yeah, the Giants play pretty well at the Adelaide Oval. They have a fairly good record there. Won the final against Port Adelaide there last season. So I think GWS would be too strong. Adelaide just... Yeah, the connection's not there, and I just don't think their list is quite good enough. I think they overachieved last year with a poor. They had a good fixture. They had a good fixture, so that got them probably on a run, more confidence. And this year, it just hasn't got a plan at all. Tex Walker's missed quite a few games. It's a massive worry that he's still such an important player for them at 34 years old, and he's nearing the end of his career. And there's been word out of Adelaide that he hasn't even been offered a contract for next season with Adelaide. And do other clubs have a look at him in the premiership window? So that would be quite a bizarre way if he doesn't finish his career as an Adelaide Crows player. That would be one of the more shocking switches in AFL history. Really, he's just an Adelaide player through and through, and to see another club's jumper would just seem photoshopped.
Yeah, it would
just
seem
be weird, absolutely weird. But GWS for mine.
I think the Crows push him. I think they give him a real push, but I don't think they're going to win this one. I think it's just, again, it feels like every week for Adelaide, it's the same story. They have to win. They have to show something. And it feels like Adelaide have had a lot of these performances where they are gallant. They push, they push, but it's not enough. I think that, again, they will give GWS a bit of a scare, but the Giants will win this game. I still think Isaac Rankin, though, looking good for multiple goals in this game. I think he's been one of the bright sparks for them this year, especially prior to that hamstring injury. I think if they can get Riley Thilthorpe back in the second half of the year, I think it'd be key just to get him in from, getting games into someone who's a high draft pick, someone who they can, he's someone they could build their forward line around the future, especially if Tex does leave. He's one of those players they can really look to in the future because they have to start looking for what they do have going into 2025, because if there is all that talk that players might be leaving, there might be a bit of a clean out. They've really got to work out, what level does this go to? Is this going to be a complete gut, or are they going to go rebuild again, or is it just going to be, sort of picking off the fringes, trying to, get some decent trades in, trying to get some salary cap relief? Who knows? So it'll be a fascinating game on Saturday night, but I think the Giants get up. The other one on Saturday night, this is, I think, one of the flip of the coin games this weekend. Geelong versus Essendon at the MCG. The Cats have been just way off it after their brilliant start to the year. They've only won once since that undefeated start of, it was 7-0 after they beat Carlton, and they just got over the line against basically Richmond's VFL team. Since then, they have just fallen to bits. They're taking on Essendon's side, who got the job done against West Coast. They did what they had to do. They haven't really been convincing in the last month, but they're still sitting in third. This game's massive for both of these two sides.
Oh, huge. Geelong has had the wood on Essendon for a number of years now. They've really bullied up on them, and this is a golden opportunity. They'll never get a better chance than this, the Bombers, to get one back on the Cats. Geelong's home game, the country game
Yes.
in East Melbourne at the MCG. Figure that one out.
Yeah.
It should be in Geelong.
Yes.
It should be a Geelong home game. Essendon should be going down the highway. But, yeah, that's a massive plus
Especially
for the
now,
Bombers.
40,000 people can go into GMHBA Stadium.
Exactly.
Like,
You'd fill it up.
Yeah, like I know it'll be a big crowd on Saturday night, but come on, make it, bring it to the country. As you said, it's a country game. Have it in the regions.
It's absolutely ridiculous. So a massive win there for the Bombers. If they had to go down the highway, you wouldn't be picking them. You wouldn't even think you'd be picking them, I don't think, despite Geelong's form. But, yeah, it's hard to go past Essendon. Like you said, they haven't been convincing. They've beaten sides that you expect them to beat. Yet they haven't really taken a scalp yet. Geelong at the moment probably isn't a scalp, but it would just be a confidence boost considering the history between these teams and the way Geelong has just dismantled them over the years. So I think the Bombers, let's see what Jake String can do against a contender. He's been really good. He does bully up on the bottom place teams, but can he do it on Saturday night against Geelong?
Well, this is another one. We talked about Cam Zerha earlier. Jake Stringer also coming out of contract.
Yeah.
And I mean, there is so much, I think, for him. Like, there's a lot of interest about how much he's going to be worth in the open market. How much does he demand? It's what that next contract's going to be, which you would think might be the contract that sees him through to retirement. This is a big game for both these two sides, but I'm going to disagree. I think the Cats get up in this one. I think the Cats just get up, and I think that the pressure rises on the Bombers again because, they have to get a scalp. They got a win against GWS, which was a good win, but now the fact that GWS have started to fall off a bit, the questions are starting now come back of, are they really that good? People loving to sort of neg the Bombers fans about that. But if Essendon can win this one, it would just really give them the confidence that they can go into finals and actually cause some problems and finally win a final as well. But if Geelong are able to win this game, it would also really turn the tide for them. No Tom Hawkins this week, potentially no Patrick Dangerfield as well if he can get off his ban. Questions over whether we'll even see Tom Hawkins again. It looked like quite a nasty injury on Friday night. So if you're someone like Shannon Neal who's going to probably get another opportunity this week, this is the chance for him to sort of go, this is my opportunity to really show the future. This could be my role for the future going forward. And I think the Cats might just get up. It's going to be a close one, and I think they just get up. But Zach Merritt's been in some good form. I think 25 plus disposals for him on Saturday night's looking good. Sunday at Marvel Stadium, the Saints against Port Adelaide. St Kilda, they've been better before the bye. They won 2 in a row. Then they pushed the Lions at the Gabba, taking on a Port Adelaide team who have spoken about. They're down on confidence. This is the perfect time for the Saints to get them. And you know what? I actually think the Saints are going to get them on Sunday. I think they're going to win at Marvel Stadium.
Yeah, I don't think so.
You don't think so? No.
We spoke about Geelong Essendon, Geelong having the wood over Essendon. Yep. Port Adelaide have just smashed St Kilda over the years. Even go back to last year, St Kilda was on this unbelievable start to the season. We're at home, Friday night, couldn't manage to beat Port Adelaide, who were under the pump at that stage. So it's a great opportunity for St Kilda. If they can get a win here, that would be a massive confidence boost for them. But I don't think there's any other team Port Adelaide would want to be playing after a performance like that. All the heat's going to be on them this week. If they can't respond, then Hinkley probably walks away. If it's another bad loss, if they're competitive, he probably hangs on. Well, he has to hang on. There's still a chance to play finals. It'd be
you have to give him at least till the end of the season. Like, give him a chance,
It'd be almost unprecedented to move on a coach in AFL. I know it happens in other sports when you're in a pretty good position, but in AFL, I can't remember the last time a club would have moved on a coach still in finals contention. So surely last at the end of the season. But yeah, I think they get up. I think they play a bit better. They weren't terrible until they were snapped in half by the Lions halfway through the second quarter. They just fell to bits. They absolutely fell to bits. I think Ken Hinkley's shown throughout his tenure that he can recover from pretty precarious sort of positions, and he can get the backs against the wall mentality and get them up. So I think it'll be a pretty galvanising sort of win for Port.
This is not going to be a fun watch.
Oh, it's going to be ugly.
It is St Kilda. If St Kilda can make this, the typical sort of game that they would like for it to be and just be, a game where both teams are under 70 points, you give them a red hot crack, right? Like, you give them a real chance. They're actually favourites going into this game, St Kilda. I think it is virtue of them playing at Marvel Stadium.
Yeah.
And you know what? Look, I'm going to stick by it. I think the Saints win, and I think they do it in a very sort of, St Kilda-ish way. Jack Steele looking good for 25 plus. I think that they break that hoodoo against the Power. I mean, you talk about that hoodoo goes all the way back to when we were still playing games in China before COVID. I mean, Port have had the wood over St Kilda for such a long time.
Even when St Kilda were playing games in Tassie in the 2000s, Port Adelaide were winning down there, and St Kilda were good at that point in time.
Exactly.
They were still managing to win. It was
and there was the famous, I mean, they played in the prelim in 2004 that the Power
Absolutely,
won.
yeah,
Like it really is a long running hoodoo that Port Adelaide have always had St Kilda's number. But there's also this like conspiracy theory, I think, that I don't know if it's too much anymore, but Saints fans used to feel they never played home games at Marvel Stadium against Port Adelaide until about last year. So finally they get one against Port Adelaide. It's one of those weird fixture anomalies with, Collingwood ever playing Sydney at the MCG, all those sort of ones that you just never see. But we get it here. So I think the Saints do get up in this one. Saturday afternoon, Richmond against Carlton. A bit of a traditional rivalry here. Richmond have been, it's been a tough year for them. They're coming off the bye. Look, I was expecting a lot more against them in Dusty's 300s against Hawthorn. They were
terrible.
Just nowhere near it against the Hawks. Carlton are full of beans, but we know what Richmond are like when they seem to turn up for these games against Carlton. Carlton have had the wood over Richmond for a long time, but even earlier this year, Richmond pushed Carlton all the way. Do you give them any hope, or do you think Carlton roll on and defeat the Tigers here?
Absolutely no hope at all. I think Carlton do this so easy. Tom Lynch, another setback, so he's going to miss this game. He was only back for the one game against Hawthorn.
It's just so much bad luck.
Out of sorts in that one, understandably after missing so long, and he's out again. So he'll miss. If he was back in, he would boost that forward line. But there's a massive hole there without him, and McAllister Lafau, who was really impressive, filling in. He's out for the season as well. So they just really struggled to score against Hawthorn in Dusty's 300th after Dusty kicked the opener. So I think Carlton will just continue on the winning ways. And it was close early in the season, like you mentioned. Richmond pushed them all the way, but they had a better team playing that night than they do now. So I think Carlton got their tails up, and we'll smell a bit of blood in this one.
It was a horror fixture as well, because Richmond lost so many players to injury that night as well. It felt like they were just absolutely pillaged that day. Yep. It feels like there's a bit of a trend looking at these games. There's a lot of like hoodoos of teams that had hoodoos against each other. St Kilda, Port Adelaide, Geelong, Essendon, North Melbourne Bulldogs, Richmond, Carlton, and maybe now the script is starting to flip. And I think the Blues get up in this one quite convincingly. Charlie Curnow's been in some great form, looking good for multiple goals in this game as well. Final game of the round, he's back.
Oh, he's back.
He's back after 2 games off. Harley Reid returns against the Red Hot Hawks at Optus Stadium. The
20-page lift out every day in the West.
Here we go. It's going to be a big week in WA. Do you give West Coast a chance against one of the informed teams now that Harley is back? I've tipped him. I think he's going to kick multiple goals in this game. I don't know if it's enough to galvanise West Coast, who actually weren't that bad against the Bombers.
No, they were fine. They were very
good, competitive. Do you give them any chance?
I give them a bit of a chance.
Yeah.
I do. Hawthorn coming off the bye, they had momentum. Sometimes, like you said earlier, the bye can really rejuvenate teams, but also as well, like teams coming off the bye can be flat, and Hawthorn might be one of those teams. It's a pretty tough trip to get off the bye. West Coast got Oscar Allen back as well.
Yeah.
That just strengthens their forward line significantly. You got Jake Waterman, who's having a breakout season, and then you got Oscar Allen as well. So then that causes the defence to go, okay, we've got to man up both these guys because they're both guns. So I'm sensing an upset here. I reckon that the Eagles can get it. I reckon the Harley Reid show will be back in town, and they will be going mad for Harley in this one. He might, he'll be very raring to go. He had the 2 weeks suspension and the bye as well, so he hasn't played for nearly a month, and I think he might put on a show on prime time for Harley on the Sunday evening time slot.
Well, it's midway. It's had a mid-season sort of refresh at the moment, and you look at how that game against St Kilda ended for him with the suspension, gave away those free kicks late in that game against the Saints, and obviously they lost that one in a real nail biter. But him coming back, you just know it's going to the entire town is going to be up for this. Like, I know their season is, over. They're not going to make finals this year. Everything's now looking ahead to the future. And right now it's about finding those green shoots. You mentioned the return of Oscar Allen, getting a good 2 months out of that forward line now with him and Jake Waterman, seeing Liam Ryan start to find some form again, getting Harley Reid back and just going, you know what, let's get 2 months of this guy just absolutely hitting his straps and just going for it will be great. I agree. The Eagles get up in this one. As much as Hawthorn have been really good, they are due for a loss. They are due for that game, which will just be, and I wouldn't be surprised if it comes this week. You just get a sense it's going to be packed. Like, it's going to be a full Optus Stadium. Those fans, the second he gets on that ball, they're going to be getting behind him. But I'll tell you what, it would not surprise me, knowing Sam Mitchell's, looking at him, what he was like as a player, but also the way he's dealt with sending a tagger. Don't be surprised if maybe he brings Finn McGuinness in this week.
Hard
and maybe,
tag.
There's a bit of an extra attention for Harley this week. I think they've got something up their sleeve planned for Harley Reid.
That's a very good point.
I think, Sunday night, pencil that one in. If you've got no plans for Sunday night, get yourself in the couch and watch that game. It's going to be great. But looking forward to dissecting that next week, Ollie. That's all we've got time for here on the Footy Frontline podcast. Enjoy the entire weekend of football. We'll be back next week to dissect it all right here.